Good afternoon and welcome to our NABS Talk, Everyday Inclusion, Understanding and Building a Neurodiverse Workplace with Ian Preston. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, before we get going with the talk, let me introduce you to NABS. We're the charity for people working in advertising, marketing and media. And we offer lots of services, including workshops and explore sessions, therapy, referral, and bespoke help from our friendly support team. Because we're a charity, all of our core services are free. We rely on donations from the industry to help us to help you. We are very pleased today to bring Ian Preston to you. Ian is a renowned neurodiverse creative industry leader and DE&I advocate. He's got more than 20 years in digital client services. He's passionate about all things digital and transformation. Ian's worked for top flight businesses, including Wunderman Thompson, RGA, and Publicis. Ian proudly advocates for neurodiverse communities, working for the creation of inclusive cultures for the good of all businesses and all people involved. Now, today, Ian is going to share his insights with us on how to create neurodiverse friendly workplaces. It's going to be a really brilliant and informative hour, whether you're neurodiverse yourself or whether you're looking to support colleagues who are living with neurodiversities. Now, while Ian presents his thoughts, we're also going to be answering your questions too. We'll do our best to get as many of them answered as possible. So we've got a lot to get through. Let's get going. Welcome, Ian. How are you?
Doing really well, thank you, Louise. How are you?
Yeah, I'm very good, thank you. I'm really looking forward to what you've got for us today. So let's get started with your presentation and let's get chatting.
Thank you so much for inviting me along to join you today. We're going to touch on a few different areas of neurodiversity and my own personal experiences of being ADHD. I'm going to talk a little bit about personal things that I've found really positive and some other areas where I've needed to kind of work hard to kind of thrive in our industry in various ways. It's also a great cue to say, at times it's a little bit exhausting to talk. So I really appreciate all the questions that you guys are sending over and the help that gives as well, because I think it's always helpful for an ADHD wanderer's brain to have some cues to keep me back on track. So I really appreciate that. So a little bit of an introduction, one of those classic icebreaker slides. So I'm Leeds born, but currently Amersham resident. The picture to the top right hand side of the screen there, although it is a builder's bum crack, that is not my builder's bum crack. However, I did spend the early part of my career as a roofer, so if I'm ever kind of judging award panels and things like that, you'll often see me present myself or represent myself as a failed roofer from Leeds, because I didn't quite complete that part of my career. In the bottom left hand corner are my two monsters, my two children, my boys. That's James and Robbie, and invariably Robert on the right there will arrive in a restaurant dressed as some kind of superhero, which, why not? If I could be Spider-Man every day, I would be. And then I think fast, I talk fast. So at times, if I'm a little bit too pacey, I apologise in advance, but I will try and measure my meter. And from time to time, I do drop the odd little F-bomb if I get a little bit excitable, so I'll try and avoid that. But also just to say, there are some topics that we'll touch on today which may be triggering in some ways, so I just wanted to acknowledge that before I get into some of those topics. So I do cover some areas like addiction. I do touch on some topics around male suicide and suicide in neurodiverse communities. So just wanted to signal those things up front in the presentation. As Louise touched on, I've been really lucky and really enjoyed my career and journey in the advertising, design and creative industries. I've worked with some awesome clients and been part of some incredible teams who have managed great and award-winning work. I'm a neurodiverse leader. I actually was not open about my neurodiversity until around about 3 years ago, which came after having a mental health episode. So hence, delighted to be here today as we're recording around Mental Health Awareness Week. And then also I've been really fortunate that I've become involved in the industry from an industry body perspective. So I work with the Advertising Association as part of their All in Action Plan committee, specifically around disability seen and unseen. And I was also very honoured to be invited to go to China as part of a delegation with the DTI a few years ago as well. So look, really delighted to be contributing to the industry on a wider basis as well. So I'm sure many of you tuning in will be familiar with slides like this, and I think it's really important as an illustration that helps us understand where we are in this kind of flower of neurodiversity. So I'm firmly in the ADHD purpleness on this slide. I'm all the H's, right? I'm all the H's, which is the hypersensitivity, the emotional dysregulation, impulsivity. I got all the kind of action ones. Which also, a really strong contributor to why, from a career perspective, I feel that I've done well in many respects. And there's no place to start on that though or no better place to start on that than actually my childhood, because I think a lot of the patterns that we lay down right through to how we are as adults in the workplace will come from coping mechanisms or things that we learn and lay down as children. And as a neurodiverse individual, that's very true of me in so many respects. On the left here, you see me on a space hopper. It's scientifically proven that people with ADHD cannot ride space hoppers. Okay, that's not scientifically proven, it's not true. However, I'd love a better excuse to the fact that I'm still terrible on a space hopper right now to this day. But what was really great as a child was actually as a primary school age kid, I was celebrated for the fact that my brain was interesting. I was an interesting young character. I was great around adults. I liked to talk a lot, but I was interested in lots of topics as well. We moved a lot as I was a kid. And I would not be able to get into mainstream kind of state schooling for the frequency of moves. So I would, my mum would take me along to the local private schools and go, hey, can my son sit your exams? And I ended up being put in the year ahead at each one of those. So I was actually with kids who were older than me. That kept me mega stimulated. It was brilliant for me from a behavioural sense. However, as I got older, it was very clear that I was both naive from an age perspective around my older peers, but also due to my ADHD and my diagnosis at that point being hyperactive, it was hard for me to understand signals between people, those social nuances. At times I was bullied, because I was very naive and really wasn't keeping pace with how the emotional development of other people was taking place. So roll forward to my kind of teenage years, and I was that classic kind of bad teenager, attracted and drawn to the things that would give me my enjoyment. And actually what I didn't understand then was what I now understand and unpacked is that's the chemical imbalance that comes from my ADHD. You are innately drawn to things that give you a dopamine hit, that give you a dopamine release, and it just happens that it's easier at times to be doing that from bad or antisocial things. And I'll touch on that a little bit later again, but I think what is true is it's very difficult for us from a cognitive level to make a distinction between those two states at times. And so what you're getting satisfaction from is not necessarily the thing that's best for you in life and work. And so moving forward into how our styles, if you like, as an ADHDer differ from people who may be described as neurotypical. And I really like this description from Thomas Armstrong, which he quotes in his book Unleashing the Advantages of Your Differently Minded Brain. And what's great here is this notion of roaming and homing. So an idea that our brains will roam and have attention that can notice many different things at once, but also then this ability to home and fasten into those things and engage what is often termed in the community hyperfocus. And that notion that when we trigger that right mental state, we can be into a topic like nobody else. And I think I've really valued that in a career standpoint, because I've been able to engage that in periods, and it's been a very powerful tool for me. A lot of my time has been spent in client services roles, in roles in business development. And in doing that, you have to move very quickly between different states of information and signals you're receiving or data points, and then hone into those and divine interesting factors in them, or also make connections that other people might not see. And I think that served me very well in accelerating and giving me a very positive career path in the industry. So what does that actually look like, though? And I think, given the topic today and trying to make this as practical for people as possible, I want to try and pull out some characteristics then that people can look for as signals. So what does different attentional style look like for me personally? Well, at times the conversation is going to jump around. It's just a reality. There will be things where I will go down a rabbit warren at any one point in time. I'm self-aware. It's not that I don't know that I'm doing these things. I just have to put some checks and balances in place to help me maintain some structure to conversation. But I will drift, and I will find different things to jump into. At times I'm going to pick up a device. Unfortunately, mobiles for us are a constant and perpetual distraction with, your alerts going off, everything like that. Alerts are really important in one respect to me, because they keep me on track. I set alarms and everything like that. But actually, at other times, they can be a real distraction. But I'll also try and validate things in a moment. So it'll be like, oh, that was a really interesting thing. I remember seeing an article about that. And because I have a constant fear that I'm going to forget to do something, because, hey, that's also part of my ADHD brain, I will either annotate it in the moment, so I make lots and lots of notes, or if I'm wanting to give that piece of information or validation in a moment, I'll jump onto my phone and try and find it. I'll hook onto different cues at unexpected moments. They can be visual, they can be audio. So actually, there will be signals that I will get about things that other people might not hear or interpret. I try and avoid making them as distracting as possible, but at times there will be cues that will take me in different directions. And look, I live in a perpetual world of windows and tabs. I think Louise and the team, as we've been getting things together for NABS, have seen this in full effect when I share my full screen. It's like, whoa, literally the minutiae of tabs across there.
It's a busy screen, it certainly is. And you know what? We've already had a question in about the roaming and homing, which is resonating with people. Oh. Advertising is such an always-on environment, which my roaming brain loves. However, do you have any advice on communicating and carving out time for homing moments? Right now, I work outside traditional working hours to negate everyday work distractions, but then you might get into a pattern where you're working 14, 16-hour days just to have that quiet time. It's not necessarily the healthiest way to go about it. What tips have you got?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I can empathize with that in every respect. So I'll talk about the good and bad of both very quickly. So on the positive side, I use actually like lots of different apps and like visual cues for me. So when I was office based, or more frequently in the office, because I was never really office based, I had a roaming job, let's say. I worked in lots of different countries and offices. But my home desk in the office, people would know not to tidy it. It was a non-tidy environment. But I would have lots and lots of post-its. I would have things around there that would be my visual cues to remind me to do particular tasks. The focus part of that would come in carving out time and then changing my setting as well. So oftentimes you wouldn't find me working at my desk, and I would let people know, well, I'm going to be over here, or I'm going to be at the standing desks over there. Or I would actually take myself to places where other people were working on things, but nothing related to me. And I come on to and unpack actually some of these topics, Louise, in the next few slides around what it is to try and fashion conditions that will trigger more of your homing motion as well. Again, to close out quickly on the roaming though, I think what's great about a roaming behavior is when you can record those moments as well. So on the apps front, I actually use several different ones because I don't have a one app to rule them all, and it actually helps me to jump between devices. So I use things like Pocket, which just help me get things from in and around the web. I use Shortform as a summary tool. It's a plugin for Chrome. It's actually a subscription plugin, but the Shortform plugin is really good at summarizing things that are on a page, and then you can copy and paste them into notes if you're on like an Apple device or whatever. I also use things like Notion as well, and Taskade. Taskade, which is Taskade, is essentially a list building app. It's quite complicated, but once it's set up, it's actually quite helpful to have mini projects in there with task lists that help you get through things. And then on the homing side, just to take the right-hand side of this slide, which drills into it a bit more, finding places to focus. For me, it's not necessarily quiet ones. So if I'm working from home, oftentimes I would have like put my camera on and people would find I'm not actually at home. I'm in the local leisure centre, which can be a little bit odd at first, but I signal to people, I let them know, hey, I'm in the local leisure centre reception area foyer. Now, why was that helpful for me? Well, there was kind of white noise, background noise. It happens that it's a swimming bath, so there's like a swimming bit next to me where there's the pool happening, which is quite nice. I don't know why, it feels like quite a calm place to be. And even though there's a lot of motion and people going past, I'm not really distracted by that. It's actually, I just find myself able to work very easily in that kind of environment. So yeah, changing those environments. Something called body doubling, which I didn't know the name of until I realized what it was that I was doing, and subsequently in later years have found what that is, and I'll come on to that in a second. Late nights and last minute rewrites. Against the question, I'm a late night worker. I spend most of my time in my teams and in meetings during the days. That's a good sensory environment for me as well. But then I would engage time later in the day where I can just get things done. And I'll touch again a little bit later on some of the negative parts of that, because I think it's important to go, it can fall into negative traits as well. And yeah, I have lots and lots of bullets and speaker notes. So I annotate all of my speaker notes. So when the slides come out, I think we'll probably find a way of getting those notes over as well. They won't be perfect, by the way, but at least it gives you some breadcrumbs for some of the things that I'll have been saying today. So on body doubling, it's really interesting because there's no specific scientific studies that I know of around body doubling itself, but there are a number of studies that talk about why it is people with ADHD and other neurodiverse traits find it helpful to sit beside or be among people who are also working. So there's three things on the slide here. One is around dopamine responses through to social interactions. So being around people for me is fuel. I am energized by people. So actually, this kind of setup is not like necessarily the best place for people to get the best of me, going through camera, going on video and so on. So actually being around people, you get that social interaction. What's called human motivation theory. So the notion that actually by participating in and around something that people are doing, it motivates you to be more focused and progress. And they've seen this in sports, they've seen this in lots and lots of different environments that they've studied. And then also in social facilitation. So what they call co-action effect, which is an increase in performance purely by having a person present and performing the same task. So if you think about a peloton and things like that, that's very much around social interaction theory, where in human motivation theory, it's much more around progress and concentration, but you're not necessarily actually involved in the task that they're involved in. So in an office setting for me, I would go and position myself maybe next to a team who I'm not working with, but again, because they're engaged in something, I would engage better in what I'm doing. Does that all make sense, Louise? I just want to make sure that
it does make sense. And I'm wondering whether, when we're getting to that point about communicating and carving out time for honing moments, whether using body doubling might help you to carve out that time.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Louise, because actually you sometimes need to kind of have a cue or know that there's triggers or things that are going to help you get into those moments. So yes, going and putting yourself next to people if you know that you're going to have to get a task done in time for another meeting. So again, I would plan, and I still do actually plan and prep time in where I will know that I want to find a social space to go and get something done. So yeah, I've just summarised on this page how on this slide, sorry, how you can use the workplace or help people in the workplace achieve some of these things. So on a roaming perspective, if you're a team member, if you're a manager, allow people to roam in conversation. But I think it's helpful to summarise them to bring back on track. So what I like actually is if someone's in a meeting with me, they know my traits, they've worked with me. If they take a beat and go, okay, great, this is awesome conversation, guys. So just to summarise, what I've heard is, I actually really appreciate that. I like the fact I don't find it interrupting. I find that it helps me maintain focus, stay on track and contribute in a constructive way. I also appreciate it when it's done in a polite fashion and respectfully, a signal to move a conversation on. Again, I'm a self-aware person. A lot of us are. And so actually, when somebody goes, that's been really cool, we're a little bit up against it now, so let's just pick out X point. I'll find that a polite way, especially when it's done, in a really, when it's done in a kind fashion, because at the end of the day, I don't want to be distracting people. And then also recognizing and acknowledging when tangents are there. I think we can all do more of this. And so I make a real point, whether people are neurodiverse, or part of our neurodiverse community or not, but I will try and make a point where I've heard something in a meeting, and again, my brain helps me do this because I interconnect these things. I'll try and make a point in meetings of going, hey, X person, I just wanted to track back to your comment earlier and just say thanks for that, because it was really interesting and it's actually helped us build something forward from it. And so actually recognizing those things, I really appreciate that, because in my own head, I'll be really honest with everyone, I'll be kicking myself for 10 things that I feel that I've done wrong every day, probably in every meeting. And so those are little moments that give me a positive stimulation and a little bit of a dopamine release that really helps me. In the homing perspective, let people choose their focus spaces. I think it's great that we think about workplace and inclusion. In fact, on one of my slides, I've left a report from HOK Architects on this subject. I think when people talk about focus spaces, they innately assume that that's got to be quiet. Actually, let people help people find and choose their focus spaces and allow them to fix on those for themselves. Don't determine, oh, if you're going to be focused, you have to go here. Be kind when people are otherwise chatty and sociable or become irritable or anxious. I am one of those people. So when I'm in a homing mode, I'll sometimes still be in an open space, but unlike normal times when people just brush past me and go, hey, how's it going? Yeah, let's have a quick chat about X. I'll have to go, really sorry, I'm right in the middle of something here, just got to be zoned into it. So, just give people a bit of leeway on any of those moments. And if I could say anything, I will forget to eat and drink all of the time. And so anybody who's passing by me and knows me will drop me a drink off, drop me a little snack off, and honestly, it is one of the best things in the world that helps me help them, and I just feel so much better for it. So I've mentioned signals, and I think this is a great way, even when I hadn't disclosed about my ADHD, I would still signal to people about traits or behaviors that I have, or things that help me from a communication perspective, just be the best version of me for them as well, okay? And so I would often say to people, right, email is a bit busy for me, and I'm often in meetings. If you don't hear back from me, just drop me a WhatsApp, would you? Or drop me a text and just give me a little nudge. I won't mind. It just helps me just make sure I picked up on that thing in my inbox. And I still do that to this day. I do it all the time just because I think it's fair to people. And I also think it means that I don't have to disclose and say, hey, this is what I'm about, right? And then I think is doing it as a leader, that actually reminds people that they can do it for themselves. And so it's a small thing. And actually, if you think about it from everybody's own perspective, just letting people know that, and then somebody, instead of reacting, going, oh, well, isn't that person difficult or awkward? Actually, once you set those things down, what you're doing is everybody gets to say that. Everybody goes, yeah, actually, it's really helpful for me is this, or actually, I'm a person who is going to be in time for meetings and I'm okay with that. Whereas for me, I'd be going, it's great if there's a really important meeting coming up, maybe drop me a little message. So I will hear from my team to go, hey, everyone calls me Prez, by the way. So, hey, Prez, we're getting together in X room in about 10 minutes time, you're set. I don't see that as intrusive. It's really, really valuable to me when people just do that. So yeah, so signals I think are really helpful and help people without having to disclose.
We've got a really good question on this because that you're a senior guy who's very confident and has been through years of this. We've got questions from people at the beginning of their careers who aren't feeling as confident in their abilities to communicate what they need. So as a junior member of staff with autism and with language processing difficulties, how do you communicate with more senior or older team members about their ways of working that may be difficult to access or adopt?
That's a really great question. So I'm going to go with the positive slant first of all. I think it's really important to do that. So I think many businesses now are becoming far more aware of this as a conversation and a topic. So I would always lead with everybody is here with the best of intentions and everybody wants to help each other succeed. On entering a business, obviously the first thing you can do is choose to disclose, and I'll come on to why that is a decision that we want to encourage people to do from an advertising association perspective. But if you don't feel comfortable doing that, I think in the early stages of entering into a business, understanding either from an HR person what the common norms and processes, if you like, are, and then you being able to play back to them in a constructive fashion where that isn't helpful. So I think having HR support is useful in those situations because you can help them be a broker. Outside of that, with the people directly, I always think that, and again in a positive sense, why would anybody feel negative towards you if you're going, hey, I just want to come and be the best version of me in this new job that I'm in. I'm really excited to be here. There's one thing that would really help me to bring the best of me. And actually, when I'm getting email, for example, at times, I'll miss things. This is me putting that into my personal state again, right? So if you wouldn't mind, I might need a little reminder from time to time. That's just me. I think on the other side of that, if there are specifics, whether it's verbal communication, I think actually, again, that summarizer step can be really helpful. So again, if it's a manager or leader, if you're just checking back in and say, I just want to make sure that in X meeting or in Y setting, it was a little bit busy and I just want to really make sure that I'm checking off the things that need to get done. And I want to make sure it's done in a way that is going to be the best of what you need. And I think that can be a positive way of doing that for everybody. If you are facing challenges and that person is not receptive to it, I think there are other resources that I touch on in here as well. And I know NABS, you have support resources on the site as well that are far more comprehensive around if you do find challenges with some of those areas as well. And so I dig into some of those resources as well, because I'm sure there'll be some more signposting in there. But that would be my perspective.
Okay, great. We also have a question from someone. I'm autistic and sometimes really struggle with the way one of my managers communicates and seems to expect me to almost mind read and infer things that haven't been explicitly said. I'm not sure how to approach the situation as my neurotypical colleagues seem to be able to deal with it. Any advice? Is it similar? So it's just a case of checking in and say, can I check my understanding on this?
You know what? I'll add a little build to that as well, actually, Louise. And I think, actually, do you mind if I'll stop sharing slides very quickly and then jump back?
Go for it.
Am I on video?
Yes, we can see you.
Right. Hello. Yeah, so look, I think this is a really important one because I think this is where our colleagues play a really important role for each other, right? And so without consciously necessarily doing it, I've paired with what we term neurotypical people in the workplace to help me interpret and understand signals, right? And we've all come across managers who will have a particular style for whatever reason, and maybe we feel like they're abrupt, or maybe we feel like we just don't vibe with them, we just don't understand them, but then the person right next to us totally gets them. And so actually talking to that person who's almost like an interpreter for that kind of thing can be immeasurably helpful. And again, I do look to team environments where, ultimately people want to help each other and want to try and get the best out of everybody's work experience. So I would look to those. But if you see that somebody's really getting it, be approachable. And, I don't think people mind if you're a little bit vulnerable with it, to say, I don't quite get it. I'm sure it's not, my manager's fault, but I really struggle with just understanding that. You just seem to nail it, which is awesome. Could you help me a little bit and just make sure that I'm starting to learn some of those signals and understand that a little bit as well, because it would really help me. There is a reality though that for everybody, at times there are just certain people that we're wired differently, and we just don't quite get and interpret that. And just all I'd say is just don't feel alone in that as well, because it's human nature. And there will be moments where we kind of shrug, and I do as well, whatever my neurotype, and go, we're just not vibing, And I've had that with clients as well, where I've had client situations where I've had to kind of go, we seem to be we seem to come at things in different ways. And actually, I can see there's people in and around my team who just totally are on point with this and are working really well on it. Actually, I should step back from a little bit from that conversation, because I'm probably not contributing in the way that I want to, and maybe I'm standing in the way of you just getting really good work done with the rest of the team. So yeah, I think hopefully that helps as well. But I totally empathize with the notion that interpreting those signals and interpreting how social settings can be for people can be really challenging at times.
I have a couple of questions linked to communication, which is on feedback. So someone asking how to best approach giving feedback when you're unsure if the person you're giving feedback to is acting in a certain way due to their neurodiversity. And then someone else who's an HR professional who's just joined a new agency where a high proportion of the team identifies neurodivergent, and they're keen to work on feedback in a new appraisal process that doesn't cause extra anxiety to people who may be more prone to feeling hypersensitive and anxious due to their neurodiversity. So what are your thoughts around that?
Right. So first of all, great questions, by the way. And really made me pause to think. The review process can be really anxiety inducing, right? And both the process of gathering the feedback and asking for it can be hard for people. When people don't receive it and HR professionals ask them to chase it up or anything like that, again, there's a lot goes on in your own head, right? Oh my God, why is this person, we've worked really well together, but why aren't they sending the feedback? God, don't they like what I've been doing? Is there something I'm not seeing? Me personally, I will internalize a lot of that. It will cause anxiety. It will cause questioning. So from an HR position, I think having some prefaces around how feedback is gathered, if people have disclosed, I think it's entirely appropriate around review time to send a message from an HR standpoint and say, hey, it's review time coming round. We understand that people during these processes can feel notions of anxiety as they gather feedback, as they work through the processes, or as they think about how they contribute feedback. Please let us know if you're going through any of those things, and we're kind of here to help with the process. I would also say that these snapshots, as I call them, of moments in people's careers, workplace, lives, are a real double-edged sword, right? At some moments they can be like fanfares and really warm, rewarding, and at other times, just by the fact that we've lost a client, the pitch didn't go great, you happen to have been ill and off during a period, and it's been a particularly challenging one for other people, or outside influences that people will bring into a room that maybe aren't reflective of your performance, but that context maybe isn't helpful, right? It's hard to insulate a process from all of those things, but again, I think it's really important that we set clear context around any snapshots of feedback, right? And I'll give you some examples. I think when I've received feedback from people, the classic STAR, situation, task, action, result kind of thing, as it's very hard to glue everybody to a structure for feedback, but actually being a little bit specific about an instance of something is really important. I think it's also important for people giving feedback to acknowledge that they were in a snapshot moment as well, right? And so it's entirely possible and plausible that when they've had a conversation with someone, there's been something negative said, like about me. Oh, Prez was, not really present in that pitch as we might have expected him to be, right? Now, on the one hand, that just sounds like I've not been engaged in a pitch. On the other hand, it might have been that I was off doing something else that was a priority, and actually one of my team was right in the middle of that process. So in that person's feedback, they might have said about one of my team, my God, so-and-so was right in the middle of it and had their sleeves rolled or whatever. But their expectation was, for whatever reasons, well, Prez was going to be the person who was in the middle of that. Now, maybe I didn't signal well enough that this other person was stepping into that role. But actually in that feedback, I think we all need to make sure that we set context really clearly around any of those feedback moments. And for people with neurodiversities, if they've signaled that, I think any HR that's involved in that process or any manager should be really cognizant of the fact they go back and not challenge that feedback, but go, can I just check on the context for that feedback? What else has been going on? Because for me, having a more complete picture of any of those moments actually helps me reassure myself of, if there was negative feedback, I've talked too much, I've talked over people, whatever it might be. It's also balanced with a, look, we recognize that actually you had 7 pitches going on in 3 markets at that moment in time. Actually, I have the opportunity in that moment to go, okay, I recognize that moment. What I want to offer though is the fact that actually it was in a week where I couldn't get my meds. And actually that's a reality right now in the shortage of medication that's going on. A couple of weeks ago, I was interviewed on 5 Live about this very topic. Now, I wouldn't automatically walk into a space and go, oh, hey, by the way, this week I've not got my meds, so look out, world, right? But, actually in a feedback setting, I may be able to sit and go, oh, do you know what? I recognize that moment and I understand it. And actually there's a broader context to what was going on there. So I just want to make you aware of it. Does that help answer that, Louise? I know that was I've covered quite a breadth.
Yes, it's big questions and lots to take from your answer as well. I mean, the theme that I'm getting is that if you assume the best and go for transparency, if it feels safe to do so, there are advantages to that. Obviously, you have to know that you are in a safe environment, and we'll come on to what leaders can do in order to make that safe environment for people. I'm conscious that we have a load of questions and that we still want to do some more of your slides as well. Could I just get a couple more questions in, and then perhaps we'll go back to the slides?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so here's another big question. What organizational tips do you have for up and coming professionals in their field that are trying to build for promotions, but to get there you have to manage more responsibilities?
That's a really good one. Thank you for that. So managing more responsibilities. Again, my personal reflections. Again, because of my emotional dysregulation, sometimes those things would be. I would really struggle to understand what people's expectations were of those new processes that were put in place. So it's great when you get a promotion, right? But then all of a sudden it's like, I've got to think about review processes or whatever it might be, or different things. I think having people that you can either formally or informally have there as mentors is really useful. So I know through my career, there's been people alongside me who I've been able to ask for their input, their help, their support at different times. I think organization and structure, in spite of the way that my brain works, I have to impose structure upon myself in different ways, right? So rehearsing things for me is really important. My slides are an exact kind of representation of that. You know, there are notes in my slides, as you know, badly interpretable for the outside world as they might be at times. They really help me because I actually sit and write out what I'm doing. So when you're stepping into a new role, actually rehearsing that new role for yourself is important, I feel, right? I don't know. I like to back things up with research that I've done. So apologies, I'm kind of a bit on the who fear Louise, but I'd love to. I'll see if there is anything out there. But for me, rehearsing situations. I know for certain people with anxiety that they will plan ahead for these situations that they're going to go into. Another example that's just come to me actually as we've been talking is I will ask people for agendas for meetings, and wherever possible, and going back to that HR question that we had before around what you can do for people, giving people the questions ahead, I think is absolutely critical. I don't think it gives people unfair advantage, and I don't really think that you're just testing how people think on their feet if you just bombard questions at them without them having been able to prepare, right? So actually give people questions in advance, and please set, even if it's just a few bullets from an agenda, so somebody who is coming to a situation can prepare themselves for it. Now, as you're going and progressing through your career, I would suggest that if you do those things, both for yourself and for other people, it will innately help you prep. Now, the other kind of thing I would add in is build in your own time and be disciplined about your advanced preparation for things. Again, at times I would be working very, very late, and I would try and do this as frequently as possible. As my career progressed and I was traveling a lot, my moments to do that were actually in airports and in taxis, but I would always have present some notes or something that I could make sure that I was already thinking about connections I could make in the next meeting I was going to go into, or into the relationship that I was going into. And so, yeah, I think trying to bring in some of those aspects to what you're doing would be helpful. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, that sounds really good. There's some practical tips there. Right, I'm conscious that we are whizzing towards the end of this, and we need to look at your brilliant slides and maybe get a couple more questions in.
Yeah, no problem. Let me just try and do a quick share of my screen again. One moment, please.
I mean, one thing's for sure, looking at the volume of questions that we've had and the interest that we've had in this talk, is that this is a very real and live issue that touches lots of people in the industry on both sides, whether you're managing people who are neurodiverse or whether you're neurodiverse yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really appreciate everyone's engagement here. I just want to do a very, very quick plug for the latest version of the All-in Action Plan that's been released specifically on Action 2, which is we're trying to find ways that we can make more everyday signals. And I'm one of these people where I don't always get my vernacular right. I don't particularly like the word normal, because there's lots and lots of different ways of what people might interpret as normal, but we all live in days of the week, and having a notion that things become more everyday for me feels positive and comfortable. And so in this case, the action plan is the action 2 is really about this everyday inclusion. Okay, so asking your staff or visitors if they have any accessibility needs. And I think Danny, who heads up the action plan, Action 2 group, phrases this really well. He did an announcement last week in Manchester where this plan was announced. And his notion is, remember when you used to go to a restaurant and you were first asked about your dietary requirements? And the first times you might have gone, no, I'm fine. Actually, for me, I'm allergic to egg whites, so it's really helpful for me when people start doing that. And you know, but at first, maybe for quite a lot of people, they'd be like, oh, right, really? Now it's every day. If somebody does that, I would be surprised if 99 times out of 100 people just don't accept it as an everyday thing and just go, oh, right, oh yeah, of course. Yeah, I know, I'm all right, thank you. And just move on. It's not interrupting. It takes 5 seconds, 10 seconds. So imagine a world where we're doing the same thing with accessibility requirements. And we're saying to everyone, so we're not singling people out, we're just saying to people, hey, are there things that we can make your experience in being in our office, in work, visiting our teams, being part of our teams, that help you in getting around what you're going to do? And I think that's our notion in All In this time. Moving on quickly, in the deck when it's circulated, you'll find a couple of slides like this, where hopefully there's some useful resources, videos, bits and pieces that are going to, help like take you down some roaming that's interesting. We've had a bit of a chat. I'm going to move us through quickly, Louise. Right, Rainbow Brain, ADHD, left-hand side. This is Copilot's version of me. I didn't feed them a picture. In fact, you've all just seen me on camera, so you can see how this is. I love AI me, right? This is future me, AI me. Why have I put this in here? I put this in here because I wondered what it would look like to challenge Copilot. So Copilot is Microsoft's generative AI for images. And I wanted to ask Copilot what a picture of the whole life of a person with ADHD from Yorkshire, rugged, bald man with short beard and stubble. And this is what Copilot came back with. Now, what really intrigued me about this was my frown, or the frown of said rugged man. Now, note, in my prompt, I did not say hard life. I did not say focused. I did not cue anything to do with a notion of emotion that would be conveyed by this person. And so I thought it was interesting that whether it was the ADHD, whether it was the rugged, I wouldn't have necessarily expected rugged to be that trigger, but my interpretation of how this prompt has examined this has been to give me, or said person, future me, a frown. And I thought that was quite revealing that the algorithm did that. And so it's at this point I kind of bring us into the kind of more mental health side of things as well. And this is a snapshot of my LinkedIn. This is pinned to my profile, by the way, for anybody who wants to connect with me and is connected with me on LinkedIn. This post I made on World Mental Health Day in 2021, and it was at a point where I was reflecting on my own mental health challenges and frankly breakdown during COVID. And so what I had done for my entire life, work, career, was mask my hyperactivity, ADHD. I had chosen to use alcohol as a means to manage my behaviors and traits to help me focus. So I was effectively self-medicating to find my rhythm on a day-to-day basis. I don't think anybody who knows me or knew me through work would have seen this. I would typically treat my day as lots and lots of meetings, busy, and then maybe take my team out at the end of the day, maybe go for the drinks with clients. And then I would take myself back to a place, whether that was the office or whether that was a hotel reception when I was traveling, whatever it might be, and do my work. But what I'd found is, and what I found in my late teenage years, is that actually by having a few drinks or several drinks, that would help induce a means for me to get my emails done, get my spreadsheets and whatever done, right? Now, obviously, that wasn't sustainable. I had liver damage 3 times over. And then when COVID came around, everything changed for everyone. But I was in a position where I had built these kind of scaffolding around the way I worked and lived that was removed. So, there were times when someone would ask me as a client or a team member, there's a big problem going off in X or Y place. And my innate reaction would be, fear not, cavalry's coming, I'm on the next plane. And I literally lived 4 years by behaving like that. Now, I think, on the one hand, yes, my career very positively progressed and I am very fortunate and glad that it did. But on the other hand, what people didn't know is I was doing something quite damaging to myself to be able to perpetuate that. And I know I'm not alone in that fact. And so I got COVID. COVID actually got in my liver. So that knocked me back, and so that means of me coping with my brain was gone. And then all my social interactions were gone and everything like that, and I crashed. So at this point in time, I'm sat in my Volvo, and I'm having my first psychiatric appointment. Fortunately, I had a psychiatrist who was very open to hearing about my hypothesis around why I was having this mental health challenge at this moment in time. Although I was presenting as depressive, I was not suffering from depression. The root cause of my issues was my mismanagement of my ADHD for years and years and years. And look, the root of this is the world sees this, right? The world sees, you know, an outwardly, you know, very social, very vocal person. They see a person who likes to be, out in front and in the limelight, as it were, and meeting Chuck D in Rough Trade Records. But I love just throwing that in there, right? But there's a bit of me that is still this, and I hope people are having a smile or a little chortle in chats or when they're seeing this later, because that haircut, my God. But that like,
really is quite something.
Yeah, it is something. That's the word. But like, this is me at 16, right? And emotionally, there's a lot of times that I'm just still in that state, right? I am still this person inside who struggles on a daily basis with their emotions, with their distractions, and with just the chemical makeup of their brain that is at times really, really challenging to deal with.
Well, that brings me on to a question that comes, I mean, this unites about half the questions that we've got. As a leader, if you've got someone like you, Ian, or someone else, neurodiverse on the team, what practical steps can you take to support that person, whether or not they have a diagnosis? You may have your suspicions, they may have declared. What can you do to support them?
Yeah, no, that's great. I think let me just I'll drop slides very quickly, and I'll pop them back up, shall I? So in fact, let me just I'll actually just skip through this section, Louise, very quickly.
Okay.
All right, yeah, cool. Because I do want to bring it back to like those practical steps as well. Yeah. I just wanted to say, like, I was a person who was very much trying to get away from things. I think in that work context, there will be people whose innate reaction when they're under pressure, anxious, will not be to seek help, right? At this moment in my life, and what really transpired is, although I was from Leeds, I exited that place. I was for a time, actually transient, and just trying to run away from everything in life. And I think we will all at times feel like this, right? The nowhere to run, as I put it here. And that's a really hard emotional state for anyone to be in. And I think the first thing I'd say to answering that question in what a workplace can do is send good and positive reminders about the availability of resources to your people, okay? Whether it's NABS, whether it's other resources that you have through private mental health, private healthcare. I'm really overjoyed that there's increasingly private health plans that include built-in mental health provision as just a given part of that, which is amazing. And also the mental health officers, volunteers who are now trained in people's offices. So I want to celebrate those things. I think they're really important. But there will be times when people will feel like there is absolutely nowhere else they can go. Now, for me, as a senior leader in a senior position, and arguably my most senior role at that moment in time, to be feeling like I was my childhood self again, literally, and in a breakdown position where I just wanted to run, was incredibly difficult. But I lent into that thing that you said before, Louise, which is believe that people are there to help and want you to be the best of you. And so I went to my boss, who's on the left here, Ewan, and our chief people officer. We had just come out of a phase of lockdown where I could actually go and visit them. And I went and met Ewan at his flat. Sorry, excuse me. It's the hardest conversation I've ever had in my life, right? It was actually harder for me than telling my wife that I was getting psychiatric treatment. By the way, when I chose to approach a psychiatrist, I hadn't told anyone. I hadn't spoken to anybody. I just knew I needed professional help. So in this moment, I went to Ewan. He'd hired me twice before. I'd known him for like 13 years. And I knew he would feel emotional about the fact that he hadn't ever spotted what I was doing to myself to just work and be the best that I could be. Both of them were incredibly supportive. I wanted to carry on working. I didn't want to stop working. I didn't need time out. People do. But I wanted to find ways of building a new me to be the best leader that I could be in my work. And so I talked to them, they gave me support. They helped me with business coaching that was directed at building new ways of me having more structure around being a better leader without the need to use alcohol anymore and things that would be bad for my health. I shared with my team. This was my amazing team at that moment in time. And, again, this was a really, really hard moment because they knew me as me. And although I had these signals, there was a kind of penny drop moment in lots of ways for them in a really reassuring fashion. And they were amazing. And it was really helpful for them, I think, at that point in time to also have the rationale that my ADHD was part of my makeup. And they felt that should be celebrated. And they wanted to, because they were like, you're great, Prez, and you probably don't do enough to recognize that for yourself. And at the same time, then I decided that I was going to open up to my company. Now, I'm not saying that everybody should follow this same track, Louise. I'm not saying everybody should then suddenly go, oh, I'm now in a position of responsibility, because that's the other thing as well, is you don't want to feel that because you've acknowledged your neurodiversity, that you should then feel obliged to, do something like this, frankly. Actually, for many people, it's just enough to go, actually, I'm seen, and I feel better for the fact that I'm getting better context and settings for me to do my job. But for me, actually, I actually presented to the company without disclosing. So I've disclosed to my boss and my chief people officer and to my team, but then they would ask me as a part of a global inspiration council to talk about people who were inspirational to me. And I'd chosen to speak about 4 women who had made an impact on my life. And actually, I couldn't avoid, once I started to talk about the impact of those women, to lean into the fact that actually my ADHD and my mental health journey, that people have been so supportive on that journey. And so to summarize around that question, Louise, I think it's really important to find ways to bring people into your conversation in a staged fashion and trust in their kindness and support. Does that help answer the question?
That does help answer the question. And what I'm hearing is a lot about holding space for your teams if they come to you, talking about neurodiversity with your wider organisation, and finding ways to support people, whether that's via coaching or via anything that they bring to you with a concern, and kind of doing that research together. Ian, we're at the end.
So really conscious of that time. Sorry, Louise, my timer being on and off there, I wasn't quite keeping pace. Thank you. So there's a couple of quotes in the deck. We'll circulate this afterwards, but be the change you want to see happen. Very quick myth dispelling here. Gandhi didn't say this. Credit to Arlene, she's epic. Look into her. But I love to dispel these quotes.
That's my favourite quote.
It's a great quote. It's actually from Arlene Lawrence, who was an educator from the States. Epic. Very quick plug for the NABS services here. When you did your survey, seeing that the demand for services for emotional and mental health support had increased by so much in the last year, I think it's something we all need to be conscious of as leaders in our workplace. We also need to be conscious that we are positively inviting people from the neurodiverse community to enter our workplaces. This is a startling stat. So as I was doing my research for this presentation, I was literally lost my breath over this, that autistic adults with no learning difficulties are 9 times more likely to die by suicide than the general population. So I think we all need to, as leaders, recognise that treating and having much more open dialogue around how we invite people to signal and acknowledge their needs is incredibly important, because we are saying that we want more diverse workplaces, and we need to recognise that there is a lot of responsibility that comes with, and we should embrace that and celebrate it. And then very finally, I summarise some signs and some steps that come from a great book, Different or Adapted from Different Not Less, in here. So stepped through those, but I think actually, Louise, you did a great job in summarising those steps actually in what you said, which was, making sure that you're opening conversations with no distractions to people, validate people's feelings as often as possible, offer that support, which we touched on before, and, being an open listener, some further reading, and then, just finally, look, our people go beyond policies in our business. We actually have lots of great people. It doesn't necessarily rely on an HR pathway all of the time, and there's lots of people who will pair with you and help you be support. As leaders, we need to be comfortable with being uncomfortable and having those conversations and inviting spaces where people can have them. Signals are a great way of us letting people know that that's what we're about. And look, allow adaptive working to take its own shape. And final thing there, like, be an all-in champion and fund your ERGs. Oh my God, people take on so much in their ERGs, and businesses forget that they are taking on more responsibility and come from many of these marginalised or underrepresented groups. Fund them, please. And with that, I'll drop my presentation and just
say that bit at the end again, because I spoke over you.
Oh, sorry?
Say the bit at the end because I spoke over you. The fund your ERGs.
Oh, yeah, of course. So, and whatever you do, please, everybody, fund your ERGs. They are an essential part of everybody's organisations now. A lot of people in those marginalised and underrepresented groups put a huge amount of effort into those things, but effort needs support and support needs funding. So please, please, please fund your ERGs, and everybody will benefit from the value that they bring to everybody's community.
Okay, we've come to the end of the hour. What a great note to end on. Ian, this has been a breathless tour through some of the issues affecting the community, but I'm very conscious that there were still questions we weren't able to answer because we had so many. So Ian and I are going to put together a blog post. We will answer all of the questions, and we'll make sure all of the advice, as it has been throughout this presentation, is super practical and super easy to digest so that you can put things into place ASAP. Just remains for me to thank you, Ian. Thank you for being so open about your experiences, and it's great to know that you're a really positive ambassador for what happens if you are able to take that step to reach out for help and to start disclosing and to get the help and support that you need. It is out there. So thank you so much, Ian. Remember, NABS is here for you. Call the NABS advice line if you need more help and guidance on any of these issues. And we will see you very soon. Goodbye.